This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and it's Smackdown time. You knew this one was coming, and so here it is. We have the incumbent Microsoft Surface Pro 4, and we have the new kid on the block, the Huawei MateBook. A lot of excitement around the MateBook because the starting price at $699 is pretty attractive, and you get a nice Windows 10 tablet for the price. Both 12-inch class tablets with Surface Pro 4. Obviously, if you're looking for something really powerful with an Intel Core i5 or i7, well, the Surface Pro 4 is your choice. There are very few tablets that have that CPU inside, but the base model Surface Pro 4, like the MateBook, has a Core M3 lower powered CPU. Those are fanless designs, not as smart as a Core i5, but adequate for productivity use. So we'll talk a lot, particularly about that base configuration. Surface Pro 4 rather starts at $899, so it does cost more money. But you get the pen. With Huawei, you have to pay $60 extra if you want the pen, so that brings it up to $760 versus $899. Both of these, the keyboards, are sold separately. Both of them cost $129. Of course, with the Surface Pro 4, if you want to spend even more money, you can get one with the fingerprint scanner on it, but it's not so necessary because it has Windows Hello facial recognition using the front camera, something the Huawei does not have. There's more to talk about. We're going to look at them now. Before we get into differences in horsepower, performance, potentially, if you go for the higher-end Surface Pro 4s, let's talk about the fundamental design difference. Though these are both Windows 10 12-inch tablets, well, technically 12.3 inches for Surface Pro 4 versus 12 inches for the MateBook, they use very different designs. The Surface Pro 4 has that kind of unique kickstand design, and it gets better with every iteration. So now we have a very wide range of positions you can put it in. It's very stable. You can go down, you can go all the way like this, which is pretty handy for drawing and note-taking. It locks in that position so you can actually rest your hand on it. So it's a sturdy, stable design if you're on a bumpy bus or anything like that for a commute. It's going to stay in place. Now you're going to have this metal edge against your leg, which might not be the most comfortable thing, but it will stay in place. And I use it in my lap, actually, and it's fine, even when I wear shorts. Although I have extended periods of time with shorts, this is not the most comfortable thing. Anyway, there are a couple of other tablets that have copied this sort of design, but then there's the old school that's more like your iPad Pro keyboard case kind of thing. And that's what Huawei goes with the MateBook, and also Samsung did with the Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro S. So this is a portfolio cover. It's $129, just like the Surface Pro keyboard is sold separately too. And it doubles as a case, and it does one of this flippy floppy origami kind of things here. Now it's reasonably steady, but some people have complained that it does fall over too easily. You also certainly don't have infinite adjustment points here. You got your point here, which is the most stable, the pyramid going on there. And then you can set it up, and there's another magnetized zone like that that's even a little bit more floppy. So this one is going to be a bit less stable, but the plus is it covers both the front and the back because it wraps around like a portfolio, which is why it's called a keyboard portfolio. So it does this, it does this. There's a magnet that turns off the display, so it puts it to sleep and it knows it. So you've got this neat, tidy little, you wouldn't even guess this is a computer kind of look. It's nice, it's faux leather. And with Surface Pro 4, the keyboard cover just covers the screen. So for those of you who are worried about that vapor magnesium back, not that you really need to be, there is nothing covering the back on that. So you have to consider something else, either a rubbery back cover or some sort of portfolio case. If you really do wish to cover it, a sleeve, you name it. So it also will turn off the display, but it just does a tidy little thing like this. Now, one drawback, and I mentioned this in the full review of the Huawei MateBook, is because the magnets do turn off the screen, I guess the magnets are strong, and instead of just being a sensor on the front, apparently on the back they're there too. So if you do that, I've just turned off the screen. You see, I put it to sleep. So that's not very convenient. If you do this, it's okay though. The next most important thing is performance, horsepower. The CPU inside the Huawei MateBook is meant to be a light-duty product. Intel Core M, the lowest powered CPUs in the Intel Core line. And that's what you get all day, all night, all long. You can get a Core M3, that's the base model, that's $699. If you want a Core M5 for a little more oomph, and then that moves up to 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gig SSD, it's $999. Tops out at $1199 right now if you want a 512 gig SSD. There may be a Core M7 coming, and we heard that'll be around $1,500, which is kind of a lot for a 12-inch tablet with an Intel Core M CPU. Surface Book, the base model, has the Core M3, 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gig SSD. It's $899, so that's the one that is the closest to the MateBook in terms of configuration, but that's only the beginning. Everything else is Core i5, Core i7. You can even get with Intel Iris graphics, 4 gigs of RAM, 8 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of RAM. It's potentially a much more powerful machine. Intel HD 520 graphics or Intel Iris graphics on your Surface Pro 4, which will be faster significantly than the Intel HD 515 graphics in the MateBook. Surface Book also has a faster PCIe SSD versus the standard SATA 3 in the MateBook. And lastly, neither of these is something you're going to open up to upgrade. They're pretty well sealed. You'd have to be a real computer technician, wannabe kind of person to open one of these up. So get the amount of RAM and get the capacity SSD that you feel you're going to need with either of these. But anyway, you get the idea. For light productivity work, if you're just doing office and streaming video, the MateBook is fine. If you're going to do more, if you're buying this for college, if you're doing computer science, compiling programs, doing video editing frequently, not just your occasional hobby, maybe once a week, frequently. If you're using Lightroom, you're going to want the Surface Pro 4. It's got a lot more oomph than the MateBook. Now, in terms of portability, both of these are 12-inch class tablets. They're pretty thin. They're pretty darn light. The Surface Pro 4 is thicker, and it looks more thick than it is even because it has those squared off sides versus the nice tapered curved sides on it. So we're talking like 8.4 millimeters versus 6.9 millimeters. The MateBook weighs 1.4 pounds or 640 grams, and the Surface Pro 4 is 1.73 pounds, so several ounces heavier there. When you combine them with their respective keyboards, they both weigh around 2.5 pounds, so then it evens out. But obviously, particularly psychologically, because of those nice thin curvy sides, the MateBook just seems like a much lighter, more trivial kind of device to carry around. So that certainly has its appeal, especially if you don't need a whole lot of computing and this is going to be your second companion device on the go. When it comes to ports, you could make do with the Surface Pro 4 because it does have one USB 3.0 port, a mini display port, and even a micro SD card slot, and of course a headphone jack. So that's enough to get you started. You might be able to get away with just getting a USB hub depending on the peripherals that you're using. The MateBook is even more port constrained. It has a headphone jack, a headset jack, also works with a microphone, and it has a single USB-C port. That's equivalent to USB 3.0 speed. It's not Thunderbolt. It's not the faster USB-C. So you pretty much immediately need to get that Huawei Mate dock or some other kind of dock if you actually want to plug this into other peripherals. Huawei does include dongle adapters, so you can plug in a USB standard, USB-A, that is sort of peripheral, a single one. But that's also the charging port, so you got to make your decision. Do I want to charge or do I want to use a dongle? So therefore, you kind of really need a dock. So that's why the price of the MateBook kind of creeps up on you when you start throwing in the $89 dock in there also, and then you got your keyboard and so on. You see what I mean? We're getting kind of up there with the Surface Pro 4 pricing. MateBook has a pretty neat trick up its sleeve. Nestled between the volume buttons, there is a fingerprint scanner that works with Windows Hello, so you don't have to spend for the, fancier keyboard like you do with Microsoft if you want to use fingerprint recognition versus facial recognition. Both of these tablets have stereo speakers. They're both pretty loud. The Surface Pro 4 is definitely the fuller and more pleasing sounding one, but the Huawei isn't too bad. They also both have Wi-Fi 802.11ac dual band with Bluetooth 4 and front-facing 5-megapixel cameras, but there's no rear camera on the Huawei, while there is an 8-megapixel rear camera on the Surface Pro 4. So how about battery life? Well, with Surface Pro 4, we discovered that the battery life between the Core M and the Core i5 wasn't very different, so we'll lump those together. About 6.5 hours. The MateBook, as we've discovered with many Core M machines, battery life really isn't a lot better than the Core i5, despite the fact it's a significantly lower power CPU, probably because it spends a lot of time in turbo boost. So we found it has battery life around 6.5 hours. So you're looking at pretty much the same thing here. This is not like the Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro S that had really very impressive battery life. So how about displays? Both of these have actually quite nice displays. The Surface Pro 4's is technically better. I'll explain that in a minute. It's also a little bit larger by 0.3 inches, a third of an inch. It's not really very big difference there in terms of size. However, it is higher resolution. 2736 by 1824 for some nice round numbers there for our Surface Pro 4 versus, well, 2160 by 1440 for the MateBook, both with 3:2 aspect ratio. The MateBook is the same resolution as the older Surface Pro model, the Surface Pro 3. So that works out to 216 ppi pixel density for the MateBook versus 267 ppi for the Surface Pro 4. Honestly, they're both pretty small, so that's pretty sharp there. Now, the MateBook is the one that's a little bit more vivid, though. You can probably even see it here with our very saturated lily picture here. It has 84% of Adobe RGB versus 75% on the Surface Pro 4. They both completely cover sRGB. So you do get a little more color saturation, but the Huawei is a little bit strange. It has a very high native white point, 8200 degrees Kelvin, whereas the Surface Pro 4 is closer to that 6600 Kelvin ideal. And Huawei compensates by dropping the gamma down to 1.6 when it should be 2.2, which it is on the Surface Pro 4. So if you're using this for pro photo or video editing on the road, and I know that a lot of photographers like Surface Pro 4, the idea of it potentially take it on the road to view and edit photographs, well, you're going to get the more accurate display, even though it's not quite as punchy with the colors. It's also a bit brighter, too. You can see it just looking at it right now, other than the fact that, well, somebody just decided to take a little nap there. You're getting a brighter display with the Surface Pro 4, but you know, the near 300 nits on the MateBook isn't that bad. So if you're looking at 300 versus 360, if you're using it outdoors, it will make a difference. But for indoor use, they're both very, very bright. So how about pens? If you want this for note-taking or for artwork, that would be one of the primary reasons to consider either of these over a traditional laptop design. It's not just because they have touchscreens. Both work with a pen. Now, as you probably know by now, Surface Pro 4 comes with a pen. And here it is. It's available in a couple of different colors instead of the stock silver. I'm using a blue one right here. This functions as an eraser on the end, and we do have concealed buttons in the design right here. So it's a very good pen, 1024 levels of pressure sensitivity, N-trig technology, palm rejection, and it has cursor hover to about 1/4 of an inch to about 1/3 of an inch. Now, Huawei is using the mystery pen here. It's not N-trig, it's not Wacom AES, it's not Wacom EMR, it's not the same thing as the iPad Pro, but it's a thicker pen, as you can see right here. It's pretty light, though. I find it a little too thick, but that's not the end of the world. You don't get an eraser on the end. You do get a laser pointer there, so PowerPoint presenters and cat owners will love that. And you have two pens over here. You use Bluetooth with the Surface Pro 4 to pair it together, and basically you can then use it to launch OneNote. If you decide to pair the Huawei pen to your MateBook, well, you can do the same thing. You can have it launch OneNote or take a screenshot, depending on which button you hit. 2048 levels of pressure sensitivity versus 1024, really you'd be hard-pressed to feel the difference. Honestly, they both work very well. The pen tip here looks fatter, but it does come to a fairly small point. But still, it's a little bit fatter than the Surface Pro 4. I like them both a lot for drawing and for note-taking, so I would actually call it pretty much a draw there. They're both really quite good. With the Huawei, you're going to have to charge it over USB, and you yank the end off, and there's a micro USB port there. You can use your smartphone charger or the included USB-C to micro USB to charge it here, and they say it's good for about 300 hours of use. With Surface Pro 4, the pen should be good for about a year, and then you put in a quadruple A battery. So no charging it, you just replace a battery. That's a little on the obscure side, but you don't have to do it very often. So there you have it, Microsoft Surface Pro 4 versus the Huawei MateBook coming out in mid-July. They're both nice tablets for Huawei's first attempt at making a Windows machine. Actually, this is quite good, and it does in the end depend somewhat on what you want. I would say if you're looking for something that's a super slim tablet that looks almost more like an Android tablet or an iPad, then the Huawei has its appeal. It's even thinner, it's a bit lighter too, but you should also consider the Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro S, which is similar design to this. But anyway, for the slim and light, you're not going to do super heavy lifting with this, not probably use it as your main machine, then the Huawei can make some sense. But if you do need to use it as your main machine, say you're going off to college, you want to make sure you have enough horsepower, then the Core i5 or Core i7 Surface Pro 4 makes more sense. For $999, you can get a Core i5, in fact, with the Surface Pro 4. So it's going to cost you a little more, but you're getting that horsepower and performance. Obviously, there are port constraints involved with both of these being tablets. The Huawei is more constrained, so you're probably going to really have to get that Mate dock or some other kind of USB-C dock to make full use of this, unless you're just going to use it for a tablet and not connect much to it. Surface Pro 4 has a little bit better connectivity and a more serious and also more expensive dock. So you get the idea. If you're looking for a more powerful kind of computer and one with more connectivity, it's going to be Surface Pro 4. If you're looking for as thin and light as you can get, fanless design, spend less money, then it's the Huawei. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to watch our video reviews of each of these products, read our written reviews, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.